She's actually doing a pretty good job. Let's see how it turns out overall. She's not one of these DC judges, which I'll get to in a second. We have Jay Brack. Who's Jay Brack? Jay Brack's been a justice a long time. He got a special award from Eric Holder several years back. He's the chief of counter intel and customs and all the rest of it. He's a former assistant U.S. attorney in Washington, D.C. He's directly involved in the Mar-a-Lago search. He argued strongly for the search warrant, for the FBI raid. He's over the top. He knows very few bounds. He was in that same Florida courtroom the other week with Harbaugh. These are the people who Smith has brought in. He is accused by Stanley Woodward, who represents the co-defendant of Donald Trump, of extortion. He is accused of waiving a federal judgeship in front of this attorney who is trying to become a federal judge in Washington, D.C., for favorable testimony from the client against Donald Trump. The fact that this guy shows up in a federal courtroom in Florida without that being resolved is unbelievable to me. But that's who he is. Another hitman. Then we have Raymond Hustler, another guy that comes out of the public integrity section. So what Jack Smith did is he brought all of these guys back, all the people who have abused the law in the past, all the people who have abused and targeted individuals and turned them into defendants in the past. He brought them all into his special independent counsel office. All under the name Justice. Most come out of the Holder regime when he was there. He hired Harbaugh. He was involved in the McDonnell, Edwards, Menendez cases as well. Wow, this is Julie Edelstein. She's a deputy to Brett. Julie Edelstein interned for whom? Representative Benny Thompson. Okay. Who's Mary Dorman? Mary Dorman clerked for former Chief Judge Beryl Howell. How the hell was she on the case with a conflict of interest like that? Doesn't matter. So, there she is, the prosecutor of the case. Timothy Duree. Who is he? He's another hunter. He donated to the 2020 Biden campaign. Well, what about that? Isn't that a serious issue? You would think it would be, right? And there's more. This is what I found after many, many hours of investigation. The funny thing is, Judicial Watch has sued the Department of Justice and the Special Counsel's Office because they won't release the names of all their personnel. Can you imagine that? We need all the people who work for Mueller. Why? Because Smith doesn't want you to know. That's a lot of damage! That he's hired hitmen, hatchetmen from the Department of Justice, Main Justice, from the U.S. Attorney's Office, people who work with him in public integrity, people with connections to James Comey, almost all of whom served under Eric Holder, people with connections to Obama, and that is essentially the group of individuals who every day are looking for ways to take out Donald Trump. I want you to know this. And every day are looking for ways to take out the people who work for Donald Trump or work for Donald Trump. And of course they're trying to interfere with the election. It's not that they are as a matter of fact, it is they are as an affirmative matter of fact. They are of the same mindset as the prior group that worked so hard to interfere in the last election, which was pointed out by U.S. Attorney Durham. Nothing has changed over there. And by the way, this guy Weissman, Andrew Weissman, became head of the Enron Task Force. You know who appointed him to be head of the Enron Task Force when he was Assistant Attorney General for the Criminal Division? Christopher Wray, the current FBI director, who Chris Christie has vouched for, of course. So this whole thing stinks. Basically, now let's look at the judges in Washington, D.C., shall we? The Democrats have worked very, very hard, Obama, Biden especially, to appoint activists, left-wing Democrat judges in these district court level, trial level judgeships. First we had Judge Howe, who has since retired. Before she retired, the day she retired, she issued a very controversial decision because Jack Smith wanted to get the information and notes of Donald Trump's lawyer. involved in the documents case. Attorney-client privilege exists to protect your due process rights. If you can't consult with your lawyer, that's fine. But it's a crime-fraud exception. We have no idea how she lived. We don't have the order. We don't know a damn thing about what she did. But we do know that she ruled against Trump every step of the way and ruled for Smith and his predecessor every step of the way. She's since retired. She was replaced with Chief Judge James Boasberg. Who appointed him? Obama. He used to work in the U.S. Attorney's Office in Washington, too. There's another judge, Judge Rudolph Contreras. Obama appointee. He worked in the U.S. Attorney's Office in Washington, D.C. at one point. Judge Christopher Cooper, Obama judge. He worked in the U.S. Department of Justice in Washington, D.C. Judge Tanya Chutkan, an Obama judge. She was in the D.C. Public Defender Office, that is in Washington. Judge Randolph Moss, he worked at the U.S. Department of Justice in Washington, appointed by Obama. Judge Amit Mehta worked in the D.C. Public Defender Office, appointed by Obama. You have Judge Timothy Kelly, appointed by Trump. But Kelly worked in the U.S. Attorney Office. He worked in the Public Integrity Section of the Department of Justice. Maybe. And that's important because there's this relationship, professional relationship, social relationship. I almost don't care who appoints you, that exists in the swamp. We have Judge Trevor McFadden, who was in the U.S. Attorney's Office at Main Justice also, Trump appointee. We have Judge Debney Friedrich, was in the U.S. Sentencing Commission, Main Justice under Bush, appointed by Trump. We have Judge Nichols. I don't know much about Judge Nichols. Then we have Judges Gia M. Cobb, Public Defender's Office in D.C., appointed by Biden. Judge Anna Reyes, appointed by Biden. So you have 10 of the 12 judges in the D.C. Circuit area, in the D.C. Court, who worked at Main Justice. 8 of the 12 were appointed by Obama or Biden. All right. The Chief Judge was appointed by Obama. The prior Chief Judge was appointed by Obama. The grand jury is made up of citizens from the District of Columbia, 5% of whom voted for Donald Trump. This is why the grand jury was used in Washington, D.C. to take out Trump. This is why all those original charges were brought by the grand jury in Washington, D.C. Because where they were supposed to go, and where this grand jury was supposed to be working and investigating all these months, was in Florida. Here's the United States Department of Justice manual for U.S. Attorney. And you look at 9-11.121, venue limitations. This is required. Venue limitations. One sentence.
Day and hold you all in account. I am angry for the millions of Americans who were silenced because of your decisions, because of your actions, because of your collusion with the federal government. They can't reach out to Elon. They can't sit here today and hold you into account. We don't know where the FBI ends and Twitter begins. Free speech and even Twitter. Mr. Chairman, I yield.
The lady yields, went over 24 seconds. I'll give this quarter 24 extra seconds. As a reminder, please remember that all speakers must sign up to speak, and speakers cannot yield or transfer their time to another speaker. Thank you. Our next speaker is William Kelly. Mayor Lightfoot, you and I may have gotten off on the wrong foot. The reporter, WilliamJKelly.com. I'm a veteran reporter in the city of Chicago, Emmy Award-winning TV host,
radio, print journalism. I should be sitting over there with my colleagues, but I'm standing over here because on a weekly basis I was going viral asking you obvious questions. And instead of answering them, you told me that crime was down, my videos went viral, millions of views, comments, likes, and shares, and it was hurting your re-election campaign. So you revoked my media credential. That should never happen in a free country. And I'm asking the city council to take the media credential process away from the next mayor of Chicago and the next superintendent of police and put it in the hands of the Constitution. What you've done to the city of Chicago, and I feel like this is more of a victim impact statement than an actual public comment. What you've done to me is nothing compared to what you've done to my city, the city of Chicago, the city that I was born and raised in, the city that I love with all my heart. You became mayor. The people of Chicago elected you. You shut down our schools. You shut down the churches. You shut down the businesses. You did the one thing that I thought could never happen. As somebody who was born and raised on the south side of Chicago, I never thought in my life that I would ever see the city of Chicago brought down so low as you have managed to bring it down. Shame on you. That is a legacy that you are going to have to carry. Future historians are going to have a hard time understanding how you ever even became mayor of the city of Chicago. I intend to write that book. I intend to make sure that at least there is some possible way for the city of Chicago to move forward. I hope that you realize what damage you have done to the city. I hope that after today's city council meeting, you will pack your suitcase and get the hell out of my city. Mr. Kelly, you are a pandemic. You are a pandemic. Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
My name is Emma Jo Morris, politics editor at Breitbart. I'm here today because I published a series of news stories 3 years ago in October of 2020 about Hunter Biden's now infamous laptop, also known as the laptop from hell, which is seen as some of the most scandalous reporting of the last decade. What was more scandalous than the reporting itself, though, was the fact that it exposed the unholy alliance between the intelligence community, social media platforms, and legacy media outlets. At the time, I was deputy politics editor at the New York Post, and my reporting showed that despite then-candidates Joe Biden's repeated and furious denials, he was apparently involved in the foreign business deals of his family. Over several days, just weeks before Americans would vote for their next president, I revealed verified, authentic emails from the Biden Scions hard drive showing Ukrainian business partners receiving leaks from the Obama White House. I documented an off-the-books meeting between then Vice President Biden and a Ukrainian energy executive and introduced the world to the big guy who got action on a deal with CEFC, China Energy Company. The Post published exactly how the material for the reporting was obtained, even identifying our sources, as well as a federal subpoena showing the FBI was in possession of the material the story was based on and had been since December of 2019. But when the stories appeared on social media that morning, the venue where millions of Americans go to find their news and editors to get their angles, within hours the reporting was censored on all major platforms on the basis of being called hacked or Russian disinformation. Twitter refused to allow users to share the link to the stories, banned the links from being shared in private messages, a policy, by the way, that's used to clamp down on child porn, and locked the Post out of its verified account. Facebook said it would curb distribution and reach of the links on its platform. However, the stories were not based on hacked materials, nor were they Russian disinformation, and despite those claims appearing to come out of thin air at the time, we would eventually learn that they actually didn't come out of thin air at all. On October 19th, 5 days after the Post began publishing, Politico ran a story headline, Hunter Biden's story is Russian disinfo, dozens of former intel officials say. God, I can't even say that with a straight face, you know? Politico printed a letter completely uncritically from veteran members of the U.S. intelligence community, falsely claiming that the Post expose has, quote, all the classic earmarks of a Russian
all of them should be fired. All of them should be fired.
Most notable among the signatories of that letter were Jim Clapper, from former DNI, Michael Hayden, former CIA, John Brennan, former CIA. Despite having such damaged credibility following their participation in the Russia collusion conspiracy theory. A few days later, on October 22nd, when Biden appeared in the second presidential debate and was confronted with the facts of the Post reporting, he said to Trump, quote, 50 former national intelligence professionals said this. What he's accusing me of is a Russian plot. But it was not.
All of them should be fired.
And he knew that. Now, fast forward to this year, 3 years later. Just last spring, House investigators revealed it was a call by now Secretary of State Antony Blinken to former acting CIA Director Michael Morell that prompted the spy letter published by Politico, which bypassed agency approval processes that would have been normally applied. It is also now known that ahead of my reporting, federal agencies were priming social media companies to execute an operation to discredit it. According to internal documents released by Elon Musk upon his acquisition of Twitter, the FBI and other intelligence community members essentially directed the platform's censorship operation, in part externally by working with top management, and in part internally by social media companies hiring eye-popping numbers of agency alumni. Journalist Michael Schallenberger reported, based on documents he obtained from Musk, that during all of 2020, the FBI and other law enforcement agencies repeatedly primed Twitter executives to dismiss reports of Hunter Biden's laptop as a Russian hack and leak operation. Feds arranged for top secret security clearances to be granted to Twitter management, and even had encrypted messaging networks set up, which they dubbed a virtual war room. To this day, hundreds of people from the intelligence community work at social media companies. Over the last few years, my reporting has been confirmed by virtually every mainstream news outlet, from the Washington Post to the New York Times to Politico, when the stakes were nothing, by the way, 2 years later. No one denies that the laptop is real, that the origin story is exactly what I told you it was in the first place. This elaborate censorship conspiracy wasn't because the information being reported on was false. It was because it was true, and it was a threat to the power centers in this country. What this relationship between the U.S. government officials and American corporations represent is an unprecedented push to undermine the First Amendment, the right to think, write, read, say whatever we want. And how we respond will determine whether we see a free press as inalienable or as optional. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Morris. Mr. Sally, we recognize.
Young lady. Thank you, young lady. That's crazy, though.
Good morning, Secretary Mayorkas.
Good morning.
Is there a crisis at our southern border?
Senator, there is a very significant...
That's a yes or no question.
There's a very significant...
Is there a crisis?
Senator, there's a very significant challenge.
I think your microphone is on.
There is a very significant challenge that we are facing.
Yes or no, is there a crisis?
I believe I've addressed that question.
So you're refusing to answer?
Senator, there is a very significant challenge.
Why do we pay these people, man?
If there's a crisis.
Therefore, we are dedicating the resources.
Okay, so you're refusing to answer.
Fire these fucking people. Why are we paying these people to waste our fucking tax money?
Which is, you're and President Biden's chief of the Border Patrol in a sworn deposition in July of 2022 when asked, would you agree, Chief Ortiz, that the southern border is currently in crisis? Answer, yes. Notice none of those wiggle words, none of that equivocation. One word, one syllable, yes. Are you willing to speak with the same clarity as Chief Ortiz? Is there a crisis at our southern border, yes or no?
Senator, I'm very proud to work alongside.
So you refuse to answer. Let me ask you the next question. Has the crisis at our southern border made Americans less safe, yes or no?
Senator, we are dedicated to the safety.
Has the crisis made Americans less safe? I don't want a discourse. It's a yes or no question.
Senator, we have a challenge of...
You refuse to answer the question.
Not...
Mr. Secretary, let me show you how someone doing his job answers a question in a straightforward manner. Chief Ortiz, is the crisis that is currently ongoing at the southern border making the border less safe for Americans and aliens alike? Answer, yes. One word, one syllable, 3 letters. That's how someone answers a question and does their job. You're being a politician misleading the American people. Let me give you a chance again. Will you show the same integrity Chief Ortiz shows? Is the crisis at the southern border making Americans less safe? Yes or no?
Senator, we have 260,000.
You refuse to answer the question. Let's move on.
And security of the...
Next question, Mr. Mayorkas. Has the crisis made aliens less safe? Yes or no?
Senator, we are seeking...
So you won't answer that question either. It's a yes or no. Has it made aliens less safe?
Senator, smugglers are exploiting...
Has the crisis made aliens less safe? Are you willing to answer it?
Senator, the smuggling organizations...
Okay, you're filibustering again. Let me ask you this question. How many migrants have died under President Biden?
Senator, your phrasing of the question is actually quite misleading.
How many migrants died in 2022?
Approaching our southern border?
Yes.
Precisely why we are seeking to...
So do you know the answer? Do you know how many died?
I do not.
You do not. Of course you don't. I know how many died. 853.
That is
853. And by the way, here are the numbers that have died every year. You go back to 1998, you see it's consistently between 300 and 400, 300, 400, 300, 400. Suddenly, 2021, what happens? You get in office, and that red line are dead bodies. I've been on the Rio Grande, and I've seen dead bodies floating there who drowned because of your refusal to do your job. You don't even know how many have died. What do you say to the Texas farmers and ranchers who find pregnant ladies dead on their property, who find toddlers dead on their property? What do you say to them?
I say that is why, precisely, we are taking it to the smuggling organization.
But you are not. That is simply not true.
Number 2, it is
let me read from the Wall Street Journal. The Wall Street Journal 2 weeks ago ran an article entitled, "It's like a graveyard. Record numbers of migrants are dying at the border." The story begins with this chilling line, quote, Eagle Pass, Texas. Local officials keep a refrigerated truck to hold the bodies of migrants who drown in the currents of the Rio Grande while trying to cross the border into the U.S. Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent that this article be entered into the record. Let me ask you a different question. How many children have been sexually assaulted by human traffickers under the Biden administration?
Senator, this is precisely why we instituted...
I don't want a lecture. It's a question. How many children have been sexually assaulted by human traffickers under your administration?
Senator, this is exactly why on January 5th, do
you know how many? Do you know how many children have been sexually assaulted?
This is why we...
Okay, you're going to refuse to answer that question as well. Let's move on. It's obvious you've been instructed to stonewall. So I'm not going to let you. You don't get to stonewall and filibuster. Now, one of my Democratic colleagues before said the Democrat talking point, quote, "This problem didn't start under Biden." Look, I get it. If you're a partisan spinner, you got to figure out something to say about the absolute catastrophe that has played out under the Biden administration. True or false, Secretary Mayorkas, 2020 was the lowest rate of illegal immigration in 45 years. Is that true or false?
It is certainly the lowest level of immigration in many, many years. And what was it in 2020? What was it, Senator, in 2020 that impacted the entire world, including the United States?
Okay, so your testimony is the reason we had the lowest rate was COVID. It had nothing to do with building the wall, nothing to do with any catch and release, nothing to do with Remain in Mexico. With all respect, Mr. Secretary, that answer is laughable. And in fact, if you look at illegal immigration, let's look at CBP encounters. You can see 500,000, 500,000, it drops to the lowest level, and boom, what happens? You show up. And that red line is you. That red line is Joe Biden. And you're claiming nothing happened. Oh, gosh, this was here before us. No, you made the decision to allow this to happen. Let me ask you, we now have over 5.5 million people who've entered this country illegally under Joe Biden. How many murderers have you released into America?
Senator, I'm not aware of any murderer whom we've...
So you don't know?
Senator, let me say something.
Do you know?
If you take a look at...
No, you don't get to give a speech. Do you know how many murderers you've released?
I'm just trying to answer your question.
How many rapists have you released?
Senator, I'm trying to answer your question.
You can answer, I know or I don't know.
Senator, any individual who poses a public safety threat...
How many child molesters have you released?
...is removed into the United States, from the United States.
So your testimony under oath, subject to perjury, is that you have not released any murderers, rapists, or child molesters among the 5.5 million. Is that your testimony?
Mr. Chairman, may I have the opportunity
No, you may not. You may answer my question.
You're not...
Is that your testimony, yes or no?
Senator, you're not allowing me to answer your...
I am allowing you to answer. I'm not allowing you to filibuster.
If you take a look at the pace of immigration in 2018 to 2019...
You're refusing to answer. Let's move on. Let's move on to gotaways. Gotaways are the people that get away that you know about. Now, what happened under your administration? Gotaways consistently down at this low line, boom, you get in. And they go from below 180,000 to 600,000. Now, I'll tell you this about a gotaway. You don't know, among those 600,000 a year, you have no idea how many are murderers, correct?
That is precisely why...
Correct? Do you know how many of those are murderers?
That is precisely...
So you refuse to answer the question. You know how many are rapists? Do you know how many are rapists? This is a question. You're a lawyer. You know how to answer questions. Of the 600,000, do you know how many of them were rapists?
Senator, this is why...
So again, the answer is no. Let me ask you this. Do you know how many of them are terrorists? And I don't want to... Senator, here's my lecture on this. Do you know how many of the 600,000 gotaways were terrorists? Yes or no?
Senator, we are focused on...
You refuse to answer that as well. What's the result of massive gotaways? Well, one of the results is drug overdoses. And we now have, last year, over 100,000 overdoses who died, the majority from Chinese fentanyl streaming across the border. Now, you told Senator Cornyn you care, but look what has happened under your policy. When you open up the border to the worst illegal immigration in our nation's history, people die. You claim you care. Mr. Secretary, that is a lie. You know, some months ago, Karine Jean-Pierre stood up at a White House briefing and said, people are not just walking across the border. Was she telling the truth?
Senator, you are...
Was she telling the truth?
Profoundly disrespectful.
Was she telling the truth?
22 years.
Okay, you get to answer questions. You don't get to give speeches.
Senator, I served as a federal prosecutor.
All right, you're refusing to answer.
Bitch, you should be fucking fired. Fuck.
She was not lying on her own. She was lying on behalf of the President of the United States.
Shit don't make no fucking sense.
What?
She was lying on behalf of the President of the United States. This is a photograph from just one day along the Rio Grande of hundreds of thousands of people walking across the border. You have allowed this to happen. The photograph that was before. What are these wristbands?
I don't know what they are.
You don't know what they are?
Wow.
Mr. Secretary, you just testified to the American people you're incompetent at your job. Because I've been to the southern border, and if you go to the southern border, along the southern border, you see thousands of these wristbands because the illegal immigrants wear them. The drug cartels, every color corresponds to how many thousands of dollars they owe the cartels. You've turned these cartels into multi-billion-dollar criminal organizations, and these are modern-day leg irons because these are children being sold into sex slavery, and you don't even know what they are. That is astonishing. Mr. Secretary, how many children have been sold into sex slavery under your administration?
Senator, we are taking it to the cartel.
How many children have been sold into sex slavery? Do you know how many children have been sold into sex slavery?
With an unprecedented degree.
Mr. Secretary, I want to say to you right now, your behavior is disgraceful, and the deaths, the children assaulted, the children raped, they are at your feet, and if you had integrity, you would resign. And I will tell you, the men and women of the Border Patrol, they've never had a political leader undermine them. They despise you, Mr. Secretary, because you're willing to let children be raped to follow political orders. This is a crisis. It's a disgrace. And you won't even admit this human tragedy is a crisis.
reclaiming 1 minute chairman time. Mr. Secretary, would you like to respond to any of those questions?
What the senator said was revolting. I'm not going to address it. Your refusal to do your job is revolting.